What you don't want is for Eurasia and the global majority simply to say, we're going to be independent of America and Europe, but we're going to be just like America and Europe. We're going to try to be it better, do it better. We'll be financialized just like America and Europe, but we'll be all by ourselves, not for U.S. That would be a disaster. You want to create an alternative kind of society, not just a different economy, but a different society. The United States has talent scouts all over Europe and Asia that look for promising graduates in their 20s who are very opportunistic and yet have a seemingly wide political appeal. And they sort of nurture them, and they give them financial support from the American foundations, and bring them to America for training, and gradually groom them to be prime ministers or politicians or military leaders or political administrators who are pro-Americans. And they've been doing this really for the last 75 years. Since the World War II ended. And so you have a managerial class in Europe and apparently much of Asia that has already been protected by the United States, that has their wealth tied to support from the United States and property in the United States or in the U.S. Economy. And so the political leadership of Europe is very different from the popular perceptions of what Europe needs. Europe and much of Asia is being run for according to what benefits the United States, what benefits their own domestic populations. As long as America has been using its non-governmental organizations, its charities, its overseas subsidies to promote politicians who are favorable to the United States, the politicians will follow U.S. policies. And they'll realize they have U.S. backing to get ahead, even to the point of becoming president or politicians, as a result of all the money that's put into buying traders. So when Victoria Nuland said in 2015, we've spent $5 billion in Ukraine gaining control of the kleptocrats and the politicians to make sure that they serve American policies. If 5 billion is in Ukraine alone, you can imagine how much is in China, India, other Asian countries, all to sort of buy control there, not to mention the prestige that having an American university degree has, even though the American universities are all trying to teach you how not to develop instead of how to develop, even though they're teaching you that the way to develop is to privatize and to let the financiers, the bankers, take over your economy and run the economy for the bankers, not for the population at large. Well, if you're brought up, if you're sponsored and brought up to America, given money to study that in the university, that's how you're going to think. And the problem is, how are Eurasian countries going to develop an educational system and public media and ideology and moral values that put the population first, not the 1% of bankers first? How do we create a financial system that's not going to use finance as the new form of economic warfare, to use finance to gain control of government? How are we going to make it politically run for the benefit of the real economy of production and consumption instead of for the benefit of the financial investors who are in charge of buying up and privatizing these means of production? America and Europe is going to be privatizing more and more of the public domain, just as Margaret Thatcher began in England. America and Europe will end up like England after Margaret Thatcher and the Labour Party, Tony Blair, went even further. How do you avoid privatization? By guaranteeing certain economic rights to everybody. How do you guarantee health care, housing, and food? All of this requires some kind of an economic ideology of a doctrine. You can't just do it ad hoc. In the beginning, you do it ad hoc. You make it up as you go along. You see what's the line of least resistance, what is easiest to do. But at some point, there has to be a discussion of what is socialism today. I don't know what, maybe you don't want to call it socialism. Whatever you call it, it could be Eurasia with Eurasian characteristics. How do you create a flexible institutional structure that can evolve going forward to meet the increasing and the changing requirements of societies that are trying to industrialize, that are trying to cope with environmental problems like global warming and extreme weather? How are you going to cope with the new diseases? How are you going to confront the United States and keep it out of your region? How is Eurasia going to have its version of the Monroe Doctrine saying Eurasia for the Eurasians? There's no need for the North Americans to be anywhere near Asia. You can have your own continent and you can destroy it all you want, but stay off our territory, just like we're staying off your territory. We're dividing. It's like really the split that you had in religion 1,000 years ago. But instead of a split in religion, you're having a split in economic philosophy, a split in the decision of what's worth doing and what are our priorities? How are we going to set priorities that are going to prevent the kind of depression and economic degeneration that happened in the United States? We do want to learn from the United States, but we don't want to learn how to become like the United States. We want to learn how to avoid the problems that have occurred in the United States. In order to do that, you have to have more of a knowledge of economic history. And that's what I've been writing. I've just published my book on why Greece and Rome fell as a result of their debt crisis and concentration of land ownership and real estate in the hands of a creditor class. So all of this that's happening has happened again and again in world history. And I can write about how the problems that are happening today are very similar to what happened in the 19th century. In classical economics, classical value theory, with the idea of rent is unearned income and is predatory income. And the objective of a free market is to make markets free from economic rent, free from land rent, free from monopoly rent, and free from financial overhead. These objectives of the 19th century classical economists, Adam Smith, John Stuart Mill, and Marx, really should be the guide for what's happening. And the best way to create an alternative in a timely fashion is to familiarize yourself with ancient European history, with 19th century history, with the whole fight for a more democratic economy in the West that failed, and you want to prevent it from failing in the way it did before. And that requires essentially setting up your own curriculum. I don't know if you'll call it economics or if you call it something like how the world works, but you certainly don't want your economic planners to be educated in the United States, where they say that the way to get an economy rich is to let Wall Street and the financial centers do the planning and concentrate all the wealth in the hands of the financial billionaires. That's the message of American economic theory, and you want to avoid that. And you're really going to need your own body of economic theory and a body of economic statistics to describe what is happening in your economy. You're going to need an alternative to the kind of national income and product accounts, the gross national product statistics that in America make no distinction between earned and unearned income, no distinction between production and overhead. They think that the more overhead you have, that's the contribution to economic output. And since there's so much waste and overhead in the United States, it appears to be having a GDP that's much higher than other countries. But this is all takes the form of armaments and waste and financial charges and rent charges that are not really part of output or production at all. They're a burden on production and a subtrahend from national income, not in addition to it. You have to have to reconceptualize your economic national accounts in order to reflect this reality, and so that you can trace what's actually happening in the various countries that join this new Eurasian community. The problem is that the bureaucracies and the administrative departments of governments throughout Latin America, Africa, and Asia have all been trained not only in the United States, but as part of an economic doctrine, a neoliberal theory that's been promoted by the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund and the United States school system, and the people who award the Nobel Prize for Chicago School financialized neoliberal thinking. You need to have a bureaucracy that is trained in realizing that there is an alternative way of development. What you don't want is for Eurasia and the global majority simply to say, we're going to be independent of America and Europe, but we're going to be just like America and Europe. We're going to try to be it better, do it better. We'll be financialized just like America and Europe, but we'll be all by ourselves, not for US. That would be a disaster, because you would then in Asia and the global majority would end up just like the United States and Europe have ended up, without industry, economically polarized, with a few billionaires at the top of your economy lording it over the impoverished, debt-ridden economy at large. So what you need is whole administrative structure, an organization of government agencies and bureaucracies that are aiming to create a very different kind of society than you have in the United States and Europe. So it's not simply de-dollarization, being just like America and Europe, but using your own currency. It's being a new civilization, a new kind of civilization that's different from the detour that Western civilization has taken. And again, that's why I wrote my Collapse of Antiquity history, to show how Western civilization 2,000 years ago took a different turn from what's happened in Asia and the whole rest of the world. And you want to realize that the West has taken a detour, and you want to go back to a development that is has a strong enough government, not a palace, but something like a government party that will be in charge of structuring markets so that the whole economy benefits. And you want to make sure that everybody can support their basic needs without running into debt. If somebody has to run into debt to get medical care, to feed themselves, to get housing, as they do in the United States, then they're going to end up as a dependent class and lose their liberty. You want to create an alternative kind of society, not just a different economy, but a different society where people will not lose their liberty, but it will be a public right to have public health, to have housing, the ability to have housing of your own, to have an education of your own without running into debt, a lifetime of debt, as occurs in the United States, where running into a lifetime of debt means that you have to take a job, no matter how little it pays, and end up basically working in the financial version of debt dependency and feudalism. The West has sunk back into a kind of feudalism, financialized feudalism, neo-feudalism. You want an economy that doesn't have a feudal rentier society, and you do this by preventing families and groups and companies from getting rich by rent seeking, to getting rich without producing anything, but simply by exploitative means. You want to make economic statistics that distinguish predatory exploitation from actually making a profit. You don't want to consider what a landlord, absentee landlord, gets is adding to the national product, because that's just siphoning off income from the renters away. You want everyone to be able to have their own property, ultimately without running into debt. And the best way to do that, instead of financing property with mortgage credit, you do need a tax on rent yielding resources. You need a land tax, a monopoly tax, and a natural resource tax, and a financial tax. The tax system is absolutely critical to creating a really free market, such as the classical economists all sought to create a free market. It's the opposite of the kind of free market that the United States and Europe talk about, that is a market free for Wall Street to do whatever it wants with the rest of the economy, free for monopolists to charge whatever they want, free from creditors to foreclose on the property of their debtors. You have a whole different concept of what a free market is, a different concept of what freedom is, a different concept of what human rights are and natural rights, and a different concept of what should be public infrastructure. All of this is a different way of thinking about how the world evolves, and you need to develop that alternative and to share it so that other countries can realize, yes, there is an alternative to the America's bank-ridden, bank-run economy, and this is the outline of an alternative, and our governments are going to create administrative agencies and regulating principles that promote overall welfare, not simply financial welfare. The real economy, not the financial claims on the real economy.